Well, good day, parents. I am Pastor Erich. I'm the student pastor here at Sandhills Community Church, and I wanted to just get a couple minutes of your time to walk with you through this new phase of your student's life and the new phase that you're going to be going through as we start a new school year. I am talking to you, new middle school parents. Now, maybe you've got older siblings who've already gone through this, or maybe this is a completely new thing for you. But at Sandhills, we want to help equip you and prepare you to be the best parent you can be for your student in this new phase. So today I want to share some helpful info, some helpful resources with you, and let you know how we can come alongside you here at Sandhills. To get started, one of the things that I think we need to come to grips with first off is this phase of adolescence can be weird. It's crazy, and it's fairly unique in the development of a human being. I mean, from just doing general research, by no means an expert, but from general research, you can find out that outside of the years between baby and toddler, those early developmental years where so much is changing, there is no other phase of the developmental process that a person goes through that has more changes for physiological, social, spiritual changes as adolescence has. So this is going to be a drastic change for your student as they're really digging deep into this adolescent phase. I mean, physically, girls are experiencing high levels of hormones and hormone swings that are actually only rivaled by pregnancy and menopause. So if you wonder why your little girl who used to be a little princess is now, think about a pregnant hormonal lady in the body of a 12-year-old. Like, that could be happening to you. Boys are no less affected by hormones as they can experience releases of hormones every hour. And we wonder why 7th grade, 6th grade boys can't sit still. It's because they're pumping full of testosterone, even if they're not getting jacked, but they're just little balls of energy. Mentally, in this phase, their brain is being shaped and molded by hormones, and they're moving from concrete thinking, 2 + 2 = 4. This is black and white. To now the possibility of abstract thought, trying to piece things together and starting to connect dots in new ways, but they're not there yet. So they're in between. And if you don't know this, the prefrontal cortex part of your brain that actually helps the rational thought processes of should I, shouldn't I, weighing risks and benefits, that part of someone's brain doesn't really develop into their 20s. So all throughout the middle school and high school years, when you're going to ask your student, what were you thinking? They kind of weren't. Now, we still have to hold them to certain responsibility, but there's something to be aware of. Also, socially, things are changing. There's actually a secular psychologist, Erich Erickson, who identified these phases of social emotional development. And in the phase of adolescence, the critical task that students are seeking to accomplish is this task of role identity, defining who they are. Who am I? What do I do? What do I like? Where do I belong? And if you navigate this successfully, you move on into adulthood. And if you don't, you stay confused, you stay stunted, and we see that so much. So now, I also have to apologize if you hear me leaning away from the mic to cough. I've been battling this ongoing asthmatic thing, so we'll get through it today, hopefully. If you see me pass out, you know why, but we'll move on. And spiritually, this is a critical phase of development for your child because they're moving from a faith that could be based on, well, this is what mom and dad have said, or this is what the pastor has said. Do we want to see them move to a place where they say, this is my faith. I know I can trust Jesus with my life. I want to live for him. I'm making these decisions for myself. We want them to own their faith. So these are all big things to think about. And one of the things that we want to let you guys know is we're here for you. And if you ever were like, man, I wish I knew more of this information. Well, guess what? If you go to the Parent Resource Center out in the lobby at the church, we actually have a lot of these little phase guides. Now, this actually goes from birth. Not this one. This is for 6th grade. But we have these phase guides from birth all the way through 12th grade. So if you want to know more about what's going on physically, emotionally, spiritually with your student in their phase, please check this out. And this gives you helpful tips about how to connect with them, how to reach them at their level, and how to help them continue growing. So that's a little bit about this phase of adolescence that you're going into. So what else do we need to know about? Are there any particulars in this phase that you should be on the lookout for? Well, that's where I would love to introduce you to our handy-dandy Sandhills Phase Guide. You can also find this at the Parent Resource Center in the lobby where kids get checked in for Sand Kids on Sunday mornings. Now, in this phase guide, there's a lot of stuff. I'm only going to touch a few things today, but I want to turn your attention to, and I should put this up on the screen, Mr. Producer. Here we go. I'm just going to pretend that happened. To the kind of second section here, the first section here, parental phase and influence. One of the things that we recognize is that there are differences not only in your child's development, but in your parenting phases as they grow older. From birth, you can see it's all about care. You are controlling. The mom's super important. Everything is taken care of. You move into that, elementary age where you control a lot of their life. You're making decisions. You're telling them what to do. It's very positional influence. Because I said so works. But as we step into this new phase of adolescence and they're becoming more of their own person, that positional influence is going to start decreasing a little bit, and relational influence needs to start increasing. And that's summarized by this idea of coaching. Coaching is going to be so significant for this phase of your parenting style with your student. It can no longer be what's termed now, as you've heard, helicopter parents who just kind of hover and watch out for problems to swoop in and fix it. Well, now sociologists are actually starting to deem it called snowplow parenting, where parents just go before the child and try to erase obstacles so that they can overcome them, so that they don't get hurt, so that their emotions aren't affected, or so that they don't have to, work too hard or have something come against them. And I'm not saying you're doing that right now, but we need to intentionally pursue not that style, but a style of coaching. Whereas any good coach for any sport stands on the sideline and sends the player onto the field to go play. Now, you've equipped them, you've trained them, but you tell them, now you go do. I'm not going to hold my hands on you. You go do, and I'm going to watch you. Sometimes I'm going to watch you fail, but I'm going to be that safe place to come back to and say, okay, what happened? How can we do better next time? Let's work on this together. Let's get some more reps in and then go back out and try again. Coaching is super important, and that's one of the things that we want to help you with at church. Pastor Chris, our next gen pastor, is a phenomenal resource in walking through how we do this for a lot of different things. So I would definitely say talk to him about parenting styles and how they change. But if we go through this booklet, there's 4 critical areas of development that we want to emphasize for your students as they're developing here. The first one, authentic faith. Pretty self-explanatory. The most important thing about us is our relationship with Jesus. That really is the bedrock of all that we do. And we want them to have authentic faith, which means it's not a faith that relies on the faith of you guys or some teacher or a pastor, but it's actually their own. So one of the things that we do in this phase is you want them to actually make it their own, provoke discovery. Well, I would say a couple big things for this is modeling. They need to see you taking your faith seriously at home. Not just, yes, taking them to church is great, but do you guys have conversations about maybe a moral dilemma at work and how you actually had to think about scriptures to help you overcome it? Or maybe some decision you're making as a family about should we go on vacation or not? And then you use it as an opportunity to say, well, Jesus wants us to be good stewards of our time and our resources, so this is what we're going to do. Modeling it is important. Talking clearly about it, and also I think serving. Particularly in this age, kids need to see faith lived out. I definitely encourage you guys to serve somewhere in the church as a family or serve somewhere in the community and take opportunities to say, we're going to go intentionally love our neighbors today because we want to show them the love of Jesus in a practical way, and we're going to do something about it. Make them Help them to see the faith lived out in action and give them opportunities to do something with their faith. And that will help build that authentic faith in their lives. We're all about that too. So anything the church is doing, take that as an opportunity to come alongside, do that with your student. That makes it simpler for you. Moving right along, we have sexual integrity. That was not me being embarrassed. That's just a cough. But sexual integrity. Now, this is a tough one. Now, if your student's in public school, even private schools, this is going to be a big, big, big issue. Now, we're not just talking about abstinence, purity, culture, that kind of stuff these days. When we talk about sexual integrity, we're talking about honoring God with our whole sexuality, who we are as men and women, not just in sexual acts, but our thoughts, our desires, submitting those to God's will. Now, big things here is one of the biggest things you can do for your child is clear communication. Don't be afraid to talk about things, because if you don't, the internet and their friends at school will. And who wants to trust an 8th grader with defining human sexuality? Or you get the question, what does demisexual mean, Mom? Well, do you know what demisexual means? No, but it's okay to say, I haven't heard about that. Let's look that up together. And you be the one that's the arbiter of truth. You be the one that's the filter going, hey, let's look into this. I will help you. You can gain their trust and you can actually retain your influence by talking clearly with them and working with them on these things. Don't be afraid of hard conversations. Another thing to keep in mind is just the culture that we live in. I was reading an analysis of survey results recently found that 1 in 4 kids, grades 9 through 12, identify as non-heterosexual. This is a different world we live in. The average age of exposure to pornography is now 10 or sometimes younger. We have to be very careful, and this takes a lot of intentionality. Make sure devices are monitored. Make sure you have clear expectations of boundaries with friends, of texting conversations. There's all sorts of things to keep in mind here. But this is a very, very critical area, especially for this generation. There's so much confusion, and your student needs to see honesty, stability, and honestly, a foundation centered on God's design. So anything that you can do to promote that will drastically help. And there's a lot of helpful tips in this guide and some great resources that we point you to. So definitely take a look at those. Moving right along, healthy habits. This is short and sweet, but physically your child is changing. They need some healthy habits and routines in their lives. Now, school and sports and extracurriculars are great. Physical activity is really good, but we also actually, one of the biggest things that I have seen just anecdotally from students in this phase, rest. Your kids need rest. I've heard of middle schoolers who are going to school, waking up at 5:30 in the morning to try to get to school. They finish school, then they have to go to some sport thing from 4 to 6, and then they're coming home, and they're getting home at 7:30, then they have 2 hours of homework, they go to bed at 10:30, and they start the whole day over again the next day. That's a lot. And their bodies need rest to balance all those hormones, to balance all the things that are happening. So as much as you can do, help your students find healthy rhythms. And for you too, you need to model healthy rhythms of some kind of, rest on a weekend where things aren't always go, 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 go. Maybe intentional time to slow down, to pull away from technology. We'll get to that in a second about the phones, but I will say on the sleeping thing, one of the best things you can do for your student is 1, maybe not get him a phone, but 2, we'll talk about that in a second, but 2, take those away at nighttime. So many studies are showing that phones in the room, phones with close proximity to someone who's trying to sleep, even for you adults, myself included, they actually negatively impact our sleep habits. And when our sleep habits are interrupted, everything's out of whack. You know it, I know it. So one of the best things you can do for your students is help them rest and recover the way their bodies need And that might be by limiting their technological exposure, especially at nighttime. Which takes us to the final kind of category here of technological responsibility. So there's a lot to say here. There's some good tips in this phase guide, having clear limits and expectations, particularly for mobile devices. This is actually a big thing. There's a lot of stuff coming out about this because this generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, wherever they fall into that, if you know those terms, they are digital natives. They have grown up entirely in a mobile generation. I didn't get my first phone until I was 17, and it was a stupid flip phone. So that's not how we grew up. But they are. Their friends are. And there are so many ways it's impacting them. Even the U.S. Surgeon General a couple years ago came out and recommended, particularly for social media, but it went for phones, that teens not have social media until at least 16 years old. Think about that. How many of your kids' friends in middle school are pushing them to get on Instagram, TikTok, all that kind of stuff? And it's actually being said, most experts are now saying, no, stay away as long as you can. There are so many reasons for that. But you need to have those expectations set clearly. And then honestly, a big thing for us as parents is modeling it ourselves too. We can get sucked into our phones. I get it. I scroll on YouTube. That's my vice. I need to limit that, especially when I'm in front of my kids. My kids are young, but is it helpful for them to see me just doom scrolling through stuff and spending all my time there? No. There's another study I saw from Pew Research Center that said nearly half of 13 to 17-year-olds say they have a parent who is at least sometimes distracted by their phone when they're trying to talk to them. Now, there's obviously times where you're actually trying to answer a message or something and your kid's talking to you. You say, hey, just a second. And that's okay. But it's a gentle reminder to say, hey, what are we modeling for our kids? Am I modeling a dependence on this to be lost in entertainment and distraction? Or am I going to model a life that's lived in the present, where I connect with people relationally, where I actually have time to listen, to be present with? It's very, very significant. But also just there are so many dangers to be aware of online. I mean, you may know about it, you may not know about it. But one of the things that we want to help you with is being aware of these things. That's why there's a great resource I would like to point you to called access.org. A-X-I-S? Access.org. We'll put up a link there. They have parent guides. They have these short videos that dive into certain topics about safety and other things. They have an e-letter called the Cultural Translator that lets you know about trends and things that are going on and is a great way to stay up, at least so you can understand some things and maybe preempt some conversations. So take advantage of that resource, especially as things are always evolving in this tech world. But with that being said, I just want to thank you for taking a few minutes to listen to this. We want to help, again, resource you to be the parent you want to be in these new phases of your child's development and this new phase of your parenting. Please reach out to me, reach out to Pastor Chris or anyone else on staff at Sandhills as we want to journey with you to help equip you to lead your home to be a Christ-centered home. Thanks for taking the time.